The wind above the bottleneck sounded like a living thing howling, clawing, tearing at anything that dared to stand in its way. The line of climbers moved slowly, each step deliberate, each breath a fight against the thin air. And somewhere in that narrow, deadly traverse, a single scream cut through the gale. A figure slipped, ropes jerked, ice shattered, and within seconds, one climber vanished into the white void below the Syrax. Her name was Pasang Lama, a young Sherpa woman whose strength and experience had carried dozens of climbers safely across Himalayan giants. But on this climb this mountain known for swallowing people whole, something went terribly wrong. When her teammates called out to her, there was no answer. When they searched the slope below, there was no trace. And when they finally returned to high camp, exhausted and terrified, the truth settled in like frost. Pasang was gone. Not found. Not recovered. Not explained. A disappearance on K2 is nothing new. But this one struck a nerve among Sherpas, mountaineers, and everyone who understood the dark reputation of the world's deadliest mountain. Because the conditions were stable, the route was fixed, the team was strong. So why did one of the region's most trusted Sherpa women vanish without a single witness? What exactly happened in those final seconds on the bottleneck? Was it a misstep, equipment failure, ice collapse, or something no one noticed or no one reported? Tonight, we go back to the mountain. We retrace the climb, the weather, the decisions, and the mysteries surrounding the disappearance of Pasang Lama, one of K2's most haunting unsolved tragedies. This is K2 Stories. If you want more true accounts from the world's most unforgiving peak, consider supporting the channel. It helps these stories stay alive. Before the world knew her name, Pasang Lama was already a quiet pillar in the mountaineering world. Born in the Solakhambu region of Nepal, she belonged to a new generation of Sherpa climbers skilled, disciplined, and determined to build a future on the world's highest peaks. She had climbed Manaslu, Chowoyu, Amadablam, and several 6,000-meter summits. To her colleagues, she was dependable. To her clients, she was calm reassurance in a place where fear ruled. To her friends, she was simply Pasang, a warm smile, a steady pace, a sharp instinct. But K2 was different. K2 demanded everything. And that summer season, one of the busiest in recent years, was already shaping up to be brutal. The weather windows were short and unpredictable. The snowpack on the upper slopes was unstable. Rumors of overcrowding in the bottleneck spread across base camp like smoke, and every Sherpa, Pakistani porter, and foreign climber whispered the same warning. K2 will always take who it wants. Pasang was working with a mixed international team scheduled for a July summit push. They had trained together at camps 1, 2, and 3. They had fixed ropes, carried oxygen, set tents, and dealt with avalanche-prone slopes. The climb was physically exhausting, but nothing suggested danger beyond the usual. They were strong, coordinated, and moving on schedule. On the morning of July 27th, the team pushed from Camp 3 toward Camp 4. The bottleneck loomed ahead, a narrow, icy choke point at 8,000 to 100 meters, overshadowed by towering Syrax that could collapse without warning. Pasang moved efficiently up the ropes, checking carabiners, speaking lightly with teammates, offering the familiar encouragement that had become her trademark. But several climbers later reported something unusual. Pasang was unusually quiet, not weak, not injured, not out of breath, just focused in a way that felt heavier than normal. At Camp 4 on the shoulder of K2, the team rested. The sun dipped behind the mountain, turning the sky purple and gold. The temperature dropped to lethal levels. Climbers brewed tea, checked oxygen masks, reviewed plans for the summit push. Pasang helped prepare equipment, as she always did. Witnesses say she looked calm, even content. But she also double-checked her harness twice. She checked the fixed line system. She tested her Juma, then retested it. One teammate later said, "It's like she sensed something wasn't right." As night fell, the summit push began. A long line of headlamps moved slowly upward into the darkness. The air was calm, Wind speeds were low. It was, according to several reports, one of the clearest nights of the season, almost eerily perfect for a mountain that rarely offered such mercy. The bottleneck, however, was never merciful. As climbers reached the traverse, they clustered close to the ropes, clipping in one by one. The slope was steep, nearly 60 degrees. Beneath them stretched a drop so deep that light simply disappeared into the abyss. Every climber knew that a single misstep here could mean falling thousands of feet. Without hope of rescue, somewhere in this frozen corridor, Passant took her place in line. The team spread out, each person maintaining distance for safety. The wind picked up. Ice chips rattled against helmets. Yet everything was still under control. Then it happened. A shout, the crack of breaking ice, movement fast, uncontrolled, terrifying. One climber slipped. No one is fully sure who saw it first. Some say it happened above Passang. Others say it happened just below. But in the chaos of that split second, witnesses agree on one chilling detail. Passang was suddenly no longer on the rope. Whether she unclipped, whether the rope failed, or whether the fall of another climber yanked her off the line, no one knows. The snow beneath the bottleneck was hard and icy. A fall would accelerate instantly. In the darkness, between the shadows of the Syrax, she vanished silently. No scream, no radio call, just gone. Those closest to her position shouted her name over the wind. Others shined headlamps downward, searching for movement. One Sherpa descended a short distance before the slope became too dangerous to continue. But there was nothing, no sign, no equipment, no sound. At 8,300 meters, with temperatures plummeting and the risk of further collapse looming, her teammates were forced to stop the search. They regrouped at Camp 4, shaken, unable to process what had just occurred. Strong Sherpa men who had faced death countless times sat in silence. Passang had been young, skilled, highly experienced. She was not the kind of climber who simply slipped. Something had gone wrong, and nobody could explain it. As dawn approached, the grim reality settled over the camp. A Sherpa woman had disappeared on K2 without a trace, perhaps the rarest tragedy of all on a mountain, where most victims are eventually found. And so began one of the most haunting investigations in K2's recent history, from the last climbers. Who saw her, to the equipment she used, to the weather, to the politics and pressure that no one dared speak publicly about. For now, the only question was, how does an elite Sherpa vanish on a clear night on K2's most documented route? When news of Passang Lama's disappearance reached base camp, disbelief swept through the tents. Sherpas who had known her for years stopped working and sat quietly outside, staring up toward the mountain's shadow. Foreign climbers paused their summit preparations. Team leaders gathered in huddles, speaking in low, tense voices. Disappearing on K2 was not uncommon. Being unrecovered was not uncommon. But vanishing without a trace in good weather, on stable snow, on the most fixed and documented route in the Karakoram, that was different. Within the first 24 hours, the story of what happened at the bottleneck began to fracture into multiple versions. Each version came from an eyewitness, yet each conflicted with the others in subtle but important ways. Version 1, the silent fall. A European climber who had been a few positions above Passang reported the simplest version, a slip. According to him, he heard one sharp scream, followed by the sound of crampons skidding across hard ice. He turned and saw a figure sliding rapidly downward. In the beam of his headlamp, he could not tell whether it was Passang or someone else, but seconds later, he noticed that her position in line was empty. This version suggested a straightforward accident, a foot placement gone wrong. But it was immediately questioned, because Passang was known for her precise footwork. Sherpas rarely slipped, not on the bottleneck, not on terrain they had crossed countless times in their careers. Version 2, the rope problem. Another Sherpa, positioned below Passang, offered a different account. He claimed he saw tension in the rope, a sudden, violent jerk as if someone above had fallen or pulled too hard on the fixed line. He felt the rope shudder all the way down to his harness. Then, in the chaos that followed, he saw something he could never forget. Pasong's tumor was no longer attached to the rope. Whether it unclipped, broke, or was torn off by brute force was uncertain. But he insisted she had not simply slipped, she had lost connection to the fixed line. Something that almost never happened at that altitude, because Sherpas checked their systems obsessively. If this version was accurate, the tragedy might have involved equipment failure or rope overload. Version 3. The climber above her fell first. The most unsettling version came from a climber who had descended early due to exhaustion. He said that the real fall started above Pasong, that a climber higher on the traverse lost control, slipped, and slammed forcefully into the line. The shock could have ripped multiple climbers off balance. He believed Pasong was an indirect victim, caught in a chain reaction. But this account raised a critical question. If someone above had fallen so violently, why was Pasong the only missing climber? No one seemed eager to answer that. Confusion at Camp 4. As the climbers reached Camp 4 after the incident, their minds were fogged by altitude, fatigue, and shock. Yet in their scattered conversations, certain details surfaced repeatedly. Pasong had checked her gear meticulously before the summit push. The weather was unusually stable, no storms, no sudden wind gusts. The bottleneck had been crowded, but not in chaos. The fixed line was old in some sections, newly replaced in others. Multiple climbers had been clipping and unclipping around an anchor that might have been overloaded. In high-altitude disasters, clarity is a luxury. Memory is unreliable. Perception is distorted by fear and oxygen deprivation. But even through the haze, many Sherpas felt the same thing. Something didn't add up. One detail kept resurfacing, whispered among them like a rumor too dangerous to say aloud. Somebody knows more than they're saying. The first search efforts. At dawn, a group of Sherpas attempted to descend below the bottleneck to search for signs of Pasong equipment, tea, clothing, rope fragments, anything. But the terrain was nearly vertical, with patches of blue ice and old avalanche debris. Any attempt to descend far enough would have risked more lives. From Camp 4, the searchers scanned the slope with binoculars for hours. Nothing. No movement. No dark shape in the snow. No glint of metal. A second team tried again in the afternoon, this time moving along a slightly lower flank. But the results were the same. The mountain gave nothing back. On K2, where bodies from decades ago still lie visible beside the route, the complete disappearance of a climber was almost unheard of. The rumors begin by the second day. Base camp was buzzing with theories and tensions. Some foreign climbers quietly suggested that maybe Pasong had taken an unroped step, or that Sherpas sometimes grew overconfident on familiar terrain. These were quickly dismissed by those who actually knew her. Sherpa teams, meanwhile, whispered more serious possibilities. Was the rope overloaded by too many climbers at once? Did someone fall and yank her off the line? Was the fixed line too old or tied improperly? Did someone panic and unclip at the wrong time, pulling others off balance? Or was the truth being hidden to avoid blame or liability? Mountains attract courage, but they also attract ego. And at 8,300 meters, mistakes tend to be covered up by silence, the kind of silence that dies with the wind. Her family's reaction news traveled back to Nepal slowly, and when Pasong's family learned she was missing, her mother reportedly collapsed. Her siblings held prayer ceremonies. Local Sherpas lit butter lamps. In her village, people gathered to speak her name, hoping that the mountain would hear them and show mercy. But the climbing companies involved gave conflicting statements. One claimed she fell due to instability in the snow. Another claimed she unclipped momentarily. Another insisted the rope had been intact the entire time. Western climbers posted brief accounts online, none of them matching perfectly. The truth was becoming harder, not easier, to pin down. Why this case became so mysterious in the days that followed, 3 factors made Pasong's disappearance stand out from other tragedies. 1. The perfect weather window conditions were ideal. No storm, no wind blast, nothing that matched the violence of her disappearance. 2. Her exceptional experience. She was not a beginner, not a poorly trained guide, not an overconfident novice. She was reliable, strong, and cautious. 3. The lack of physical evidence, even in the steepest areas, victims usually leave something behind: a glove, a rope strand, a backpack, a broken oxygen mask. In Pasong's case, there was nothing. It was as if the mountain had swallowed her whole. And yet, one detail stood out during an interview days later. A foreign climber made an offhand comment that would become central to the investigation. Right before the fall, I remember hearing shouting. Not panicked shouting, more like arguing. He didn't know who the voices belonged to. He didn't know what was said. He didn't know whether Pasang was involved. But that single sentence opened an entirely new line of questioning, one that hinted at tension, miscommunication, or conflict at the worst possible moment. And as more climbers were interviewed, more inconsistencies emerged. The more the pieces were gathered, the less the puzzle made sense. By the third day after Pasong's disappearance, base camp had transformed from a bustling temporary city into a tense investigative hub. Expedition leaders, Sherpa coordinators, and a few high-altitude search specialists began piecing together what had occurred. Every scrap of evidence, equipment, GPS trackers, photographs, and eyewitness accounts was examined, cross-referenced, and reinterpreted in the frigid shadow of the mountain. Technical analysis of the route to Bottleneck itself is notorious. At roughly 8,000 to 100 meters, climbers traverse a steep, narrow corridor wedged between overhanging seracs. The ice there constantly shifts. Crevices can open without warning. Snow cornices can collapse, dumping thousands of pounds of ice onto climbers below. Even with fixed ropes and ladders, the path demands absolute attention, precise foot placement, and calm judgment under extreme stress. Pasong had passed this exact terrain multiple times before. She knew every dangerous patch, every unstable section. Yet that night, something catastrophic had disrupted the normal flow. The fixed line system was analyzed carefully. A rope specialist noted minor wear near the anchor at the steepest part of the traverse. He suggested that under certain conditions, weight distribution, tension from multiple climbers, and subtle movements of ice, the rope could have momentarily failed. But the timing, coinciding with Pasong's disappearance, remained unclear. Eyewitness accounts re-examined. Investigators began to reconcile the three conflicting versions reported by climbers. One crucial discovery: a pair of climbers just above Pasong admitted, reluctantly, that they had been talking loudly while moving, possibly distracting her. They denied causing the fall, but their admission introduced a new factor: human error influenced by fatigue and high altitude. Hypoxia. High-altitude climbers often experience microdoses of confusion or poor judgment due to oxygen deprivation, a condition known as hypoxia. Even seasoned Sherpas are not immune. Investigators speculated that subtle miscalculations in scene by anyone might have played a role. The role of ice and whether meteorological data from the region was examined next. That night's forecast had been almost ideal: low winds, stable temperatures. Yet the Bottleneck has a microclimate of its own. A local expert, who had guided climbers there for over a decade, explained, even if the summit weather is calm, the seracs above move constantly. Ice can fracture silently. The mountain doesn't need wind or storm to be deadly. Satellite imagery and recent photos confirmed the presence of minor ice shifts in the days leading up to the climb. Some fractures were located exactly above where Pasong had been last seen. Though no direct link could be confirmed, it introduced the possibility of a localized ice collapse. High-altitude rescue challenges, while standard rescue protocols exist on Everest, Kate presents far harsher conditions. Helicopters can only reach Camp 1 in good weather, leaving search and recovery largely dependent on human teams. The dangerous slope below the Bottleneck made any direct descent impossible for most rescuers. Sherpa rescue parties could only secure small sections, leaving huge areas unexamined. The deeper the slope, the more unstable the ice became. Adding to the challenge, all climbers were physically exhausted, carrying oxygen for survival, not for extra labor. The combination of altitude, hypoxia, steep terrain, and thin margins for error made any extensive search effectively a roll of the dice. The social and psychological dynamics, another factor often overlooked in K2 tragedies, is group dynamics. The international team with Pasong included climbers from multiple countries, each with different levels of experience, communication barriers, cultural differences, and varying risk tolerances can influence critical decisions. Pasong, as a Sherpa, typically assumed responsibility for route safety. Her disappearance may have coincided with moments when other climbers were making choices under stress, choices she might have corrected under normal conditions. But at that high altitude, seconds count. Micro errors can cascade into disaster. Investigators also noted a psychological phenomenon. In extreme conditions, witnesses often perceive events differently. In low oxygen, memories become fragmented, sequences get rearranged, and small details can be exaggerated or minimized. This partly explained the inconsistencies in the eyewitness accounts. Evidence that confounds equipment inspections yielded few clues. Pasong's harness, Juma, helmet, and gloves were all intact and unfound detached, broken, or malfunctioning at base camp. There was no trace of her body or backpack along the fall line, a zone where debris often accumulates. Some climbers speculated she might have been carried farther by snow or ice slid into a hidden crevasse or buried under a minor avalanche that left no visible trace. Satellite and drone surveys were limited due to K2's remoteness and topography. Despite technological assistance, no definitive answers emerged. The mountain had swallowed one of its most competent climbers, and with her, a small portion of certainty about safety at extreme altitude. The aftermath at base camp, the psychological impact was profound. Teams hesitated to move higher. Some climbers abandoned their summit attempts entirely. Others pressed forward, but with caution intensified by fear and uncertainty. Sherpas spoke privately about the fragility of human life on K2, noting that even the most experienced can vanish. Without warning, expedition leaders began planning long-term protocol changes, more strict spacing on fixed lines, additional safety checks at critical points, and better communication among teams. These measures, though necessary, could never erase the tragic reality. Pasong was gone. Lessons emerging while the investigation into her disappearance continued. Several lessons became clear. Experience alone is not sufficient. Even the best climbers remain vulnerable on K2. High altitude, hypoxia affects everyone. Decisions can falter even for trained Sherpas. The mountain's terrain is unpredictable. Stable weather is no guarantee of safety. Recovery may be impossible. K2's unique dangers mean some climbers may never be found. Human and environmental factors intersect. Overcrowding, miscommunication, and shifting ice all contribute to compounded risk. Despite these insights, no single cause could be identified. Pasong's disappearance remained a mystery, one that challenged assumptions about expertise, preparation, and safety. The disappearance of Pasong Lama sent shockwaves far beyond her expedition team. News spread through the mountaineering community almost immediately, amplified by social media, climbing forums, and international news outlets. Veteran climbers and Sherpas alike were shaken. Pasong was not just another climber. She represented a new generation of highly skilled Sherpas, capable of navigating K2's most dangerous stretches. With unmatched expertise for the Sherpa community, Pasong's disappearance was both personal and professional. Experienced guides gathered at their lodges, discussing the tragedy in hushed voices. Some older Sherpas remarked that they had never seen a disappearance on K2 quite like this. They spoke not only of grief, but of a shared sense of vulnerability. In a culture where mountain safety is learned over decades, losing one of their own under seemingly controlled conditions was a sobering reminder that even experience could not guarantee survival. A senior Sherpa commented, "Pasong knew these routes better than anyone. If she was gone, it meant the mountain had changed or something we didn't understand had happened." This sentiment spread among climbing teams. At base camp, anxiety grew, not just for safety, but for morale. Some climbers considered abandoning the climb entirely, fearing that the risk had escalated beyond what they could manage. International media picked up the story quickly. Headlines highlighted her status as one of the youngest female Sherpas lost on K2, emphasizing both the tragedy and the mystery. Social media amplified theories, some reasonable, others speculative and sensationalized. Rumors ranged from equipment failure and ice collapse to conspiracy theories involving crowding and team mismanagement. For the global audience, especially older viewers familiar with climbing legends of the Himalayas, Pasong's story became a symbol of the mountain's unpredictability. In articles and documentaries, journalists emphasized the fragile balance of human ambition and natural forces on K2, often using her disappearance as a cautionary tale. Within the mountaineering community, the incident sparked serious debate about safety protocols on K2. Experts discussed the need for stricter rope management and spacing in high-risk zones, like the Bottleneck, enhanced communication systems for climbers and Sherpas at extreme altitudes, better pre-climb risk assessments, including weather, route conditions, and crowding, mandatory tracking devices for high-altitude climbers to improve search and rescue effectiveness. While these discussions offered hope for future improvements, they also highlighted the inherent unpredictability of K2. Even the most advanced measures could not completely prevent accidents or disappearances. For those who had climbed with Pasong, the loss was deeply personal. Many described a mixture of grief, guilt, and survivor's remorse. Team members replayed the events in their minds, wondering if a different choice, a slower pace, more distance between climbers, a second check of the rope might have prevented the tragedy. The mental burden was heavy, intensified by the mountain's harsh conditions, and many climbers experienced insomnia, anxiety, and a lingering sense of unease during the remainder of their expedition. One climber later wrote in a journal, "You train for years, you respect the mountain, you trust your guides, and still, the mountain takes what it wants. There is no reason, only consequence." K2 is often called the savage mountain for a reason. Its technical challenges, extreme weather, and remote location make it far more dangerous than even Everest. Pasong's disappearance reinforced the mountain's fearsome reputation. Climbers and Sherpas alike were reminded that no matter one's skill, vigilance, or preparation, the mountain could and would act independently of human expectation. The Bottleneck itself became an even more haunting symbol, a site where ice shifts, avalanches, and crevices combine to form lethal obstacles. Experts noted that in recent years, climate change had accelerated glacier movement, increasing instability in the very section where Pasong vanished. The mountain was literally changing under the climbers' feet, making old assumptions about safety unreliable. Even in tragedy, Pasong Lama's disappearance prompted reflection and improvement. Expedition teams began revising climbing strategies, focusing on risk awareness and the importance of strict discipline in critical zones. Her name became a touchstone for discussions about respect for the mountain's power, the responsibilities of climbers and guides at extreme altitudes, the need for cultural sensitivity, and acknowledgement of Sherpa's essential role. The international climbing community recognized her skill, courage, and dedication, honoring her memory. By emphasizing safety and mentorship for future expeditions, she became both a cautionary tale and a symbol of resilience, a reminder that the mountains demand respect and vigilance. Despite investigations, satellite imagery, and multiple expeditions attempting to retrace her last steps, Pasong's body was never recovered. This fact contributed to the enduring mystery, and in some ways, elevated her story into legend. Older climbers would tell her story at base camps and lodges, a narrative combining awe, fear, and reverence for both her skill and the mountain's indifference. Her disappearance also influenced policies. Teams started limiting numbers at the Bottleneck simultaneously, emphasizing spacing on fixed lines and improving communication between climbers. Pasong's story became a turning point, showing that even modern mountaineering expertise cannot completely neutralize the raw power of the Himalayas. For viewers, especially those over 50 who may have followed mountaineering legends, Pasang Lama's story resonates on multiple levels. It's a narrative about courage, skill, and human ambition. It's a mystery that highlights the limits of preparation in the face of nature. And it's a reminder that the mountains are indifferent to fame, youth, or experience. They only reward respect, caution, and sometimes sheer luck. Her disappearance remains a topic of discussion, reflection, and ongoing investigation. And while the facts are incomplete, the emotional and cultural impact is unmistakable. The story of Pasang Lama closes not with answers, but with questions. Her disappearance on K2 remains one of the most haunting mysteries of modern mountaineering. Experienced climbers, Sherpas, and expedition leaders continue to debate what happened, piecing together fragments of evidence, analyzing equipment, and recalling memories clouded by hypoxia and stress. Yet, despite all efforts, the mountain has kept its secret. K2 is unforgiving. Its sheer cliffs, shifting glaciers, and unpredictable icefalls do not forgive mistakes, and even the most skilled climbers are vulnerable. Pasang's experience, professionalism, and caution highlight one undeniable truth. Experience can reduce risk, but it can never eliminate it entirely. Her story serves as both a tribute to her courage and a stark reminder of the extreme dangers inherent in high-altitude climbing. For the climbing community, the lessons of 2024 extend beyond the tragic loss of one Sherpa. The incident has prompted changes in climbing practices, enhanced spacing on fixed lines in dangerous zones, better communication and coordination among climbers and guides, stricter attention to equipment checks and safety protocols, renewed emphasis on respecting the unpredictable power of the mountains. These lessons may save lives in the future, but they cannot restore what was lost. For families, friends, and the broader Sherpa community, Pasang's disappearance is deeply personal. It is a reminder of the emotional and psychological toll that high-altitude expeditions exact. The grief is compounded by the lack of closure. Her body never recovered. Her final moments left unrecorded, leaving only speculation, memory, and reverence. Yet her story does not fade into obscurity. It becomes part of the collective memory of K2, a cautionary tale for anyone who dares to challenge its slopes. Her courage, dedication, and expertise are celebrated, and her legacy now guides climbers in respecting both the mountain and each other. For viewers of K2 stories, Pasang Lama's story is more than just a tale of tragedy. It is a window into the extreme realities of the Karakoram, the unyielding nature of high-altitude mountaineering, and the human spirit that dares to confront the impossible. If you found this story compelling and want to learn more about the incredible and often dangerous world of K2 expeditions, subscribe to K2 Stories. Follow us as we explore the triumphs, tragedies, and mysteries of the world's most formidable peaks. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a story from the Savage Mountain. And stay with us as we bring the mountains closer. One story at a time. Remember, the mountains teach, they inspire, and sometimes they take. But every story is a lesson, and every climber like Pasang Lama leaves a legacy worth remembering.